With the release of the South African Netflix show The Polygamist, which was based heavily on the book The Polygamist by Sue Nyathi, watchers of the show have been left bewildered, sickened, and generally worried by the wicked actions of Jonasi Gomora. For context, Jonasi, as revealed by the show name, partakes in polygamy, with 3 wives all married to him at different times in their lives, with lies, secrets, and manipulation adding to the fire. Jonasi, over the course of 22 episodes, showed characteristics and mannerisms very similar to psychopaths who have been studied in the past. So today, I want to break down the dark psychology of Jonasi, what led him to becoming the kind of man who was capable of sleeping with his own daughter's best friend, assaulting his wives, and how his actions actually tie back to psychological studies as well as real-world examples of how his characteristics could be present in people you know or have known. But before that, kindly note that the video isn't to be taken fully seriously, as the character in question is fictional. But the conditions I will mention are very real. Additionally, I am by no means a licensed psychologist or in that field of study. These are all things I found online and did extensive studies on. If I got anything wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments and I will be sure to respond to them all. Before we get to the drama and the 3 wives, we first have to see how Jonasi's upbringing played a role in him becoming the man he became. His childhood is a bit of an oddball because all we're shown in the show is that his brothers are hardly around and his father is a drunk. However, we get to see that Jonasi is bullied, and it seems that nobody ever really comes to his aid except Essie. During childhood, a child going through something similar to this is likely to develop something along the lines of secondary psychopathy. I know, it's a reach, but hear me out. It's a form of psychopathy where antisocial, reckless, and callous behaviors are primarily driven by environmental trauma, severe neglect, or chronic stress. I think this ties beautifully with Jonasi, as we saw him experience said environmental trauma as a child, getting bullied and beaten, whilst also being neglected by his family and having nobody to necessarily look up to. Again, male figures in his life being mostly away from him. I believe the nail in the coffin for this as well will be the moment in the show where Jonasi stands at the end of a gun barrel defending Essie from her gangster boyfriend. This would fall under the reckless part of secondary psychopathy, because who in their right mind would do that when there is no clear benefit for it? I know, many would say he was trying to be romantic, so let me stop you right there. Because yeah, it looks cool on screen, but in person it's just more of a what the hell are you doing? The reason I chose secondary psychopathy is because it eventually can lead to the characteristics we see in Jonasi later on in adulthood, such as narcissism. We all know Jonasi is clearly narcissistic, and that word really does get thrown around even when it doesn't exactly match the scenario or the character. But in this case, Jonasi could be classified as having NPD, or Narcissistic Personality Disorder. He also exhibits a severe clinical definition of malignant narcissism, a specific subtype where NPD crosses over with antisocial behavior and a sadistic need for control. So when you think about a narcissist, you think about someone who is basically full of themselves, can't stop talking about what they've achieved and how much more they can do. Now, malignant narcissism gets worse by adding cruelty. Guess who we saw get cruel not only physically, but emotionally? That's right, it was Jonasi. This type of narcissist actually tends to be very impressive with their confidence and charm. But little do you know that they're hiding a cruel side, much like Jonasi, who was both confident and charming to all 3 of his wives. Another characteristic of malignant narcissism would be the lack of empathy. Jonasi literally didn't care as long as he wasn't inconvenienced. If his life could go on without you disturbing him, then why should he even look your way? There are so many instances of that happening in the show that I honestly can't even list them all. Additionally, in this characteristic, a lot of victim blaming takes place. There was absolutely no shortage of victim blaming from Jonasi. An example of this would be, the kids aren't coming for dinner. He would respond by saying, because you're a bad mother. Just an example of what Jonasi would say if that did take place. Antisocial Personality Disorder, ASPD for short. The last disorder I'll cover will be this. However, I'd say that quite a few of the traits here don't fully resonate with Jonasi, but it's still interesting to see what and how much it does. The interesting thing about ASPD is that it is marked by a persistent pattern of disregarding the rights of others. Sounds similar to Jonasi's case, doesn't it? Funnily enough, ASPD shares traits with narcissism and borderline personality disorders, and how it originates in childhood can come from environmental factors like childhood maltreatment, inconsistent parenting, and parental substance use, all things that Jonasi endured during his childhood, with his father being a drunk and his older brothers being gang affiliated. So individuals with ASPD eventually start to consistently lie and deceive. They are also known to be manipulative and use tactics such as gaslighting, triangulation, or emotional manipulation to control others. All things that Jonasi did constantly in the show. Those are known to be aggressive, irritable, and have a chronic irresponsibility in major life areas. For Jonasi, his irresponsibility mainly lied in parental duties and family commitments. Since his father and brothers weren't around as much, he didn't ever get the necessary knowledge he needed on how to raise a family in a wholesome way. He left the raising of children up to their mothers. And the funny thing is, people have actually found ways of defending Jonasi and his actions based on his trauma, which is a whole topic on its own, but I will not be covering that today. That is your own thinking. You can do the thinking over there. So with that bombshell, it's clear to see that Jonasi was a flawed individual. So much of his life is honestly a tragic mess, and the saddest part is that his story isn't entirely fiction. Some people are currently living a version of his story we read and watched through the Polygamist book and series. So if you know someone going through that, or you yourself are going through it, it's important that you find someone to talk to. If you haven't subscribed, the subscribe button is right down there if you're down for more content like this, the more breakdowns, the more stuff along these lines, where we just break down stuff just for the fun of it, because it's more exciting to do this. And remember that God does love you. And from Romans chapter 5 verse 8, but God commends his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Christ died for you and me, and he loves you. Bye.